Hey there, how there, ho there, it's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to yet another Cutter Top 10 sports video. And I'm rocking the Kitchener Rangers jersey again. It's not the top 10 Kitchener Rangers of all time, although I want to do one on that topic. That is not the topic. It is a major junior one that I know my hair is sticking up. But the fact of the matter is that we're talking about the top 10 Memorial Cups of all time. So we go back to junior hockey and we're going to be doing the top 10 Memorial Cups of all time. I know major junior season is about to happen, and unfortunately, some great major junior players are not playing for major junior teams in the Western Hockey League, Ontario Hockey League, or the Quebec League because the NCAA said they're allowed to play NCAA hockey. So they jumped from major junior to NCAA hockey. Of course, it's kind of bitter for me because Adam Valentini, who was doing pretty good for Canada at the under 18 Helinka Cup over in Europe, was going to be a Kitchener Ranger. He signed a commitment for the Kitchener Rangers, but unfortunately, he decided to commit to the University of Michigan Wolverines. So, I'm a bitter man. Hopefully, Kitchener does well and makes the playoffs. Nevertheless, well, we have an 80% chance to make the playoffs because it's 8 out of 10 teams. Nevertheless, we're going to talk about the top 10 Memorial Cups of all time. And yes, there is one that will have the Kitchener Rangers on it because of bias. But it's not going to be that high up, I promise. All right. So here we go. Number 10 on the list is the 1999 Memorial Cup, where Ottawa, the home team, triumphs in it. Yeah, it was hosting the Memorial Cup. It was the last Memorial Cup of the 20th century. It had the Ottawa 67s, coached by the great Brian Kilray, go to the finals against the Calgary Hitmen, named for Bret Hart, who was a minority owner of the Calgary junior team. And it was amazing and all of that. The 67s had some great moments and all that. 1984, they won the Memorial Cup, of course, against the Kitchener Rangers, pissing me off. I would have been pissed off if I was around at the time, but that was a year before my birth. But anyway, yeah, the 1999 team, Ottawa would triumph in the small Ottawa Civic Center, but it worked out. They beat Calgary in overtime. It was amazing. Calgary had all these great players like Pavel Brandel, if memory serves me right, who went fifth overall to the Rangers, who was nothing. But they had, Ottawa had Matt Suchak and Seamus Kodak. And then, Ottawa, was it Brian? I think Brian Campbell played in for that team. But yeah, they knew what they had to do. At number 9 on the list is the 2011 Memorial Cup, making history. I know it was held in Mississauga, and I believe it was the first time it was held in Mississauga ever. Um, Mississauga beat out Barrie, Kingston, and Windsor to get the 2011 championship. Owen Sound and Mississauga qualified from the OHL, St. John from the Quebec League, and Kootenay from the Western Hockey League. In the round robin, St. John won based off of head-to-head with Mississauga. So they beat Mississauga in the round robin, which meant they were the 1 seed. And Kootenay beat Owen Sound to get to the semifinal, in which St. Mike's won 3-1. And then on Hershey Center Ice, St. Michael's couldn't do anything. Riley Brace scored a goal, but Simon Dupre, Zach Phillips, and the legend Johnny Huberdeau, Jonathan Huberdeau scored. And the St. John Seahawks, the Sea Dogs, became the first team from the Maritime provinces to be Memorial Cup champions. I know they were teams in the Maritimes off and on in the 90s and 2000s, but the 2011 St. John Sea Dogs made history and gave the province of New Brunswick and the Maritimes something to cheer about. Other major St. John Sea Dogs were Tomashuko and all of that. So, yeah, they had some great players. And Gerard Gallant was the head coach, who's gone on to screw up a few things. Number 8 is the El Bias one, the 2003 Memorial Cup, with my Kitchener Rangers winning the championship, held in Quebec City at the Coliseum. It was amazing. Quebec won. Quebec got it, of course, it's the hometown team. Hull, soon to be Gatineau Olympics, won the Quebec League. Kitchener won the Memorial Cup and the Ontario Hockey League, and Kelowna won the Western League. All that. Kitchener beat Hull, Kelowna, and Quebec in the round robin, which meant they got to the finals automatically. Hull had to play Kelowna for the trip to the final, and Hull won 2-1. The post Ramparts sucked; they were 0-3. Kitchener then beat the tar out of Hull 6-3, winning their second straight 3-goal game against the Olympique. Gregory Campbell, yes, that guy, the defensive specialist for the Boston Bruins, among others, had scored the most points in that Memorial Cup with 7. Andre Benoit took third. Peter Kenkel took fourth in that. Mike Richards took sixth in that regard for points. Future Flyers and Kings icon. And Derek Roy did his job. Future Sabres icon, among others. Scott Dickey was the best goaltender in the thing. Kitchener swept all the Memorial Cup awards. MVP went to Derek Roy. Sportsmanship went to Gregory Campbell. Goalie went to Scott Dickey, and then Gregory Campbell won for leading scorer. It was such a big move that 5 of the 6 players on the All-Star team were Kitchener Rangers. Dickey, Steve Eminger on defense, Roy Campbell, and Richards. Doug O'Brien of Hull was the only non-Kitchener Ranger. But yeah, the Kitchener Rangers did it. They ended up winning the Memorial Cup, which is pretty impressive and all that. And I was 18 at the time, so, at least I got to feel it. Number 7 is the 1989 Swift Current Broncos. Triumph after tragedy. In 1986, there was a massive team bus accident that happened, and 4 Swift Current Broncos died, including Lindy Ruff's brother, Brent. Swift Current was shaken and all that. They had a massive memorial plaque and all that, but they had resilience. And in 1989, Swift Current took on Saskatoon in a battle of the Western Hockey League for the championship, with Sheldon Kennedy and Danny Lambert leading the way. The Broncos beat the Blades in overtime and gave Swift Current something to cheer about. A massive former Swift Current Bronco on that team that had the tragedy was Joe Sakic. People forget about that. But yeah, Sakic was on the Broncos, and not in 89, but like in history. But, they did it. Number 6 is the 2012 Shawinigan Cataracts, the Cinderella story. Shawinigan was given the right to host the 2012 Memorial Cup. They lost in the league playoffs and would have to wait almost 2 months before competing in the Memorial Cup. Thankfully, they were good enough to get in the Memorial Cup automatically. Of course, the Quebec League champions, the Ontario League champions, and the Western champions had to go qualify. Shawinigan somehow shocked everyone. Shawinigan was only known in Canadian circles as being where Jean Chrétien was from, and a scandal. Nevertheless, the London Knights had to face Shawinigan in the final, and it went to overtime, and people thought London was going to take it. Unfortunately, though, for London, they lost to Shawinigan, and I kind of have a smile on my face and all that. But anyway, yeah. Shawinigan finally won it. They were known as the Shawinigan Beavers for a while before the Cataracts. They had a 43-year history in the Quebec League, and they finally reached the mountaintop, not just helping Quebec out, but winning the title on home ice, which is always pretty good. Number 5 is the Portland Winterhawks of 1983. The 1983 Memorial Cup saw things happen and all that. Portland somehow got to host the Memorial Cup in the first place, which was the first Memorial Cup to have 4 teams instead of 3. In the old days, it was always the Western champion, the Ontario champion, the Quebec champion, playing a double round robin. Top 2 teams met in the final. But in 1983, they changed it up with the host team, as long as they were good enough with winning. And if they won their league championship, then whoever took second in that league championship would move on. One such example was 2008 when the Kitchener Rangers were hosting the Memorial Cup, but they went to the finals anyway against Belleville. Even if they had lost to the Belleville Bulls, Belleville, they would have been in. Belleville got into the Memorial Cup even though they lost to Kitchener in the OHL final because Kitchener was already in. So yeah, their victory proved the influence of American talent in Canadian junior hockey as 2 major names in the NHL in the 90s came through. Ray Ferraro, known for his supposed 3 overtime goals for the Islanders against the Capitals in the first round, and Cam Neely, who's the dead man who hit me with a salt shaker. So yeah, Cam Neely, icon, played for the Canucks, and then they traded him to Boston for the one of a 50-goal scorer named Barry Pedersen, and the joke was on Vancouver. Pedersen did nothing for the Canucks, And Cam Neely was a Boston icon. But yeah, Portland finally gave the U.S. some hope and sneaking into Canada for the Memorial Cup and all that. Number 4 is Kamloops' victory in 1995, a dynasty cemented. They won their third championship in 4 years. They were basically the master classes. They had Scott Niedermayer for a while, and he was drafted from Kamloops by the New Jersey Devils in the pick that was supposed to be the Toronto Maple Leafs, but they traded that for Tom Kurvers. The fact of the matter is that, yeah, Darcy Tucker, Joe McGill, and Shane Doan all were legendary players. Tucker, for his brash toughness. Shane Doan, known for only playing play 1 year for Winnipeg before they moved to Phoenix and playing the rest of his career as a Coyote. And Joe McGilla, who was drafted by Dallas but traded to Calgary for the one of Joe Nieuwendyk, and it actually worked out for Dallas in a sense, but it also worked for Calgary, especially because of Joe McGilla being a good one. They beat the Detroit Junior Red Wings. Yeah, Detroit had a OHL team at the time. They crashed them 8-2. It was decisive, memorable, and of course, Kamloops bringing in their third title in 4 years. Number 3 is Peterborough's dramatic overtime win in '79. It was a heart-stopping fashion. Peterborough had to face Brandon in a key match for the final. I thought it was Regina that they faced in the final. But yeah, Peterborough would have to face Brandon in the championship and all that. And Steve Yzerman playing for the Peterborough Petes, which, of course, is the iconic club that Bob Gainey drafted from them in '73 by the Canadiens, even though that he wasn't an offensive star. He was more of a defensive stopper. But yeah, Peterborough won the 1979 championship and proved why they were one of the best teams in OHL and CHL history. Number 2 is the 2005 London Knights, the perfect host. The 2005 Memorial Cup was big enough with the fact that everyone was going to be watching that as a hockey fan, more so than ever, because no NHL season, because this was the year of the lockout. So London were going to be hosting it in their sparkling new arena, the John Labatt Center in 2005. They were a juggernaut, the top team in the country, and had a 31-game unbeaten streak to start the season, which set OHL and CHL records. But what made this Memorial Cup one of the best ever was the final, London versus Rimouski. Seeing that London had Corey Perry, Rimouski had, yes, Sid the Kid. All that, who wasn't going to be drafted until the 2005 draft. And Pittsburgh got the draft lottery. But anyway, London took care of things 4-0. It wasn't even close. And London, 10 years prior, actually suffered through one of the worst seasons in America in OHL history, winning only 3 games the whole year out of 80. But their comeback skill, speed, and discipline helped them out, and the home support was second to none, even though it was in London. I had to spit, sorry. Number 1, the 1971 Quebec Ramparts in the first All-Quebec final. It was a watershed moment in 1971. The Quebec Ramparts were making things happen and all that. They would take on the Edmonton Oil Kings for the Memorial Cup. Things were a little different back in the day in the early 70s because in the old days, it used to be an Eastern champ against a Western champion. They would play one game or a series of games, sometimes out east, sometimes out west. But yeah, the Ramparts hosted the Edmonton Oil Kings in the Memorial Cup at the Colisée, and Quebec won that game. And giving the province of Quebec pride, what people forgot about this is it actually was the last time a Quebec team won a Memorial Cup until 1996. So 25 years, Quebec was shut out of the Memorial Cup. It always went to the west or to Ontario. Nevertheless, yeah, the Ramparts were huge. But the 71 Quebec Ramparts, they didn't get through in a good way. I mean, the Eastern final against St. Catharines, the St. Catharines Blackhawks from the OHL, was huge too because, that was to be the Eastern representative. They had to play a best-of-7 series. Unfortunately, there were some issues because Marcel Dion, who was born in Quebec, actually jumped to the OHA to play for St. Catharines. And people in Quebec were up in arms. And basically, St. Catharines was just made to pay. Well, they had to play games in Quebec. And it was disastrous. It was so bad St. Catharines forfeited Game 6 against Quebec, meaning that the Ramparts would be the Eastern champion. I mean, you gotta do your research on the 1971 Memorial Cup playoffs. It was just amazing and big enough because Lafleur and the Ramparts were the champs. But keep in mind, Lafleur and Dion actually went 1-2 in the 1971 draft. The Habs had the first pick in 71 due to the fact that California traded it the previous year to Montreal for Chuck Arneson. And Montreal knew what they were doing. They purposely sent Ralph Backstrom to Los Angeles to prevent the Kings from being the worst team in the NHL, meaning that LA would be the number one draft pick and maybe take Marcel Dion or Lafleur. So Montreal had to make sure that Lafleur was not there, was not going to head to California. So it worked out. Oakland were the worst team. They had to give their first round pick to the Habs, and the Habs picked number one and took them. It also helped matters that Detroit took Marcel Dion second overall. It was not Los Angeles as people thought. Dion would make it to LA 4 years later in a trade with the Red Wings after he pissed off Red Wings management. But anyway, yeah, so those are some great Memorial Cups and all that. I told you, my Kitchener bias is there, but not enough to make it number one. See, I'm nice after all. Anyhow, I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.